So welcome everybody to this webinar, which is entitled The Healthy and Happy Menopause, or Happy and Healthy, whichever way round you would like it. For those of you who don't know me very well, I'm a BANT registered nutritionist, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. So we'll keep an eye on admitting people at the same time. A little bit about me in terms of my background. So I was in the corporate world for 15 years before spending 4 years retraining as a nutritional therapist. And I've been a nutritional therapist now for 15 years. I've done various shows and radio programs, BBC Radio, Sky News, BBC News, and even appeared on the Victoria Derbyshire show many years ago. I was a Radio 5 Live midnight expert. I deliver health and wellbeing seminars and employee health checks in the corporate world. A member of the Institute for Functional Medicine, a qualified DNA life practitioner, which I'll mention later, a metabolic balance and weight loss coach since 2011. So just to give you my credentials. So I'm going to talk you through what we're going to go through today. So some definitions around the menopause, common signs and symptoms, hormonal changes, the role of the thyroid and adrenal glands, lifestyle and exercise. I know some of you are more qualified than me in that, but I'll give you my two penneth. What and when to eat, body composition, because when I asked people about what was important to them about the menopause, weight gain, particularly around the middle, was one of those things that came up many times, so we'll touch on that. Testing, so many of you will know that I am very hot onto functional medicine and testing, whether that's through blood or urine or whatever. So we'll talk about a little bit about testing, and couldn't go without talking about some supplements, and lastly some top tips, and hopefully that will take us about 45 minutes, and then we will be into a Q&A. So as I say, if you want to add your questions as we go, and then I'll run through them at the end. It's probably the easiest way for us to get through everything. And as I said, if there's anything you're not comfortable talking about, obviously you can private message me either through Facebook or through text. So let's look at some definitions. So the menopause is the time when there has been no menstrual periods for 12 consecutive months. So a lot of women aren't quite sure, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, have you had no period for 12 months? No. Yes. And send them away again. So that's the main thing that the GP will use. So postmenopause refers to a time period of 1 year after the last menstruation. So in this way, the terms menopause and postmenopause actually are interchangeable. But of course, we've got the perimenopause, which most people land in, and that's the period leading up to menopause and can be as long as 10 years. Sorry for those of you that are in that phase. Some people, that can be kind of the hardest part, and then once they've got through that, they feel much better. So a little bit more about menopause. So it actually is a natural process, and I'm sure many years ago, when women were having 10, 20 children in their lifetime, it was probably quite a relief to stop having periods, and it is part of the normal aging process. Many women go through it without few or no symptoms, while others have significant or even disabling symptoms, and obviously that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And there are more women going through this transition in the UK than at any other time in history, because as we're an aging population, we've now got more and more women going through that. And it commonly occurs between 45 and 55 years of age. Obviously, there are some women who go through it much earlier. I had a friend who went through it at 19, can you believe? And it's as the estrogen levels decline, we start to go through the menopause. That's the main change, is the estrogen levels dropping. But in the UK, the average for a woman to reach the menopause is 51. It often runs in families, so you can sometimes ask your older female relatives how old they were. What I find commonly with women I see, sometimes the women in their lives have had hysterectomies and things like that, so they've no real way of knowing actually what they should be expecting. If you're not muted, would you mind just muting yourselves? I can hear a little tiny bit of background noise, but not lots. So common signs and symptoms. So this is the bit maybe where people will identify with different things. So hot flushes, they tend to be during the day. They tend to be where you feel like your body feels like you are freezing cold, and so it generates a lot of heat, but you've no way of releasing it because it thinks you're cold, and so you have this almighty hot flush, this internal volcano of heat. Night sweats is when women just wake up in the middle of the night and they are in a puddle of sweat. And then sleep disturbances, so more kind of insomnia type symptoms that might also occur. Joint pains as well, so some women may start with signs and symptoms of osteoarthritis at this point, and also fatigue as well. Sorry, this is the bad news. Obviously we'll get to the good bits in a while. A topic that perhaps women don't talk about as much as they ought to is vaginal dryness. This can also be actually dry eyes as well. So as the estrogen levels drop, those mucosal surfaces start to dry out as well. So vaginal dryness can be a real issue for women. It can make sex painful. It can make women want to avoid it. And it also can lead to vaginal atrophy. And some women, if the area gets so dry, it almost goes paper thin. So something to really keep an eye on and not ignore. And it is a topic that I think more and more women should be talking about rather than keeping it to themselves. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just physiology of estrogen dropping. So, you know, we will talk about some solutions later. And actually, some women that maybe have never had UTIs in their life might start to have them at this point, again, because that whole area is starting to change. The pH may be changing, and just its own normal barriers. UTIs might start to occur as well. And potentially, as estrogen and also testosterone drop, potentially reduce sex drive as well. And of course, good old irritability, forgetfulness, and depression, just to add in a few extra things for people. I know I do this. I get halfway through a sentence and then think I just cannot think of that word, and play kind of guess the word games with people to get to the word. So yeah, I think a lot of us can find that quite difficult, particularly in a professional environment where you need a word and it's just not there. And so that can lead, I think, to some fear and anxiety around cognitive function, as you're kind of fearing that may be on the decline. And we do know that Alzheimer's, for example, is more prevalent in women than it is in men. So that's all the bad news out of the way. And of course, as I said at the beginning, some women may have none of these symptoms and may sail through it. So it's not 100% that you would have any or all of these signs and symptoms. So I think this is a really interesting picture, and I won't go into it in too much detail, but it will be in the recording. Is you can see the different phases along the top where we've got different time frames, and what we're seeing is the differences that we're going through. So for example, we start off with a regular cycle that maybe then starts to get shorter. So we've got a longer estrogen half of the month and a shorter progesterone half. So luteinizing hormone maybe not stimulating as much as follicle stimulating hormone is. And then we start to get really irregular. So some women might even start to miss a period. So they might have 50 odd days between a period and then another period. We also see flow changing, where we might get increased heavier periods, and then for some going from spotting to flooding, which is, yeah, I experienced this, and it's just 1 minute you're fine, the next minute you're not, and that can be quite stressful. Signs and symptoms around PMS and things like that may also change as PMS tails off. We might get more muscle cramps, menstrual cramps, and you know, that whole emotion may change. And then the flashes, so as I say, they might start off quite cyclical, maybe mid-cycle, maybe around ovulation, and again, as time goes on, they become more and more unpredictable and perhaps more consistent as well. And at the bottom, this is, I won't go into this bit really, but this is just talking about follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which are the two hormones your GP would measure, and those start to get higher and higher and higher as they're trying to call to the ovaries to release you know, an egg, or to release progesterone, and that's not happening. So we start to see that getting higher and higher, and that's kind of one of the signs and symptoms you might have done in a blood test to see where you are in the whole process. So the other thing I mentioned earlier on was about the adrenal and thyroid influence on all of this. So although we've kind of don't talk about cortisol still quite so much in the nutrition world, I still think it's stress is certainly a part of the picture when it comes to managing your hormones. So the body strives to maintain cortisol levels when you are stressed, and sometimes that might be at the expense of other hormones in this pathway. So again, you don't need to know all of this, but you can probably spot you've got cholesterol at the top, so all our hormones start with cholesterol. You'll notice we've got progesterone in there, cortisol, and they're all like little roots down towards each other. So you can see that testosterone comes down, and you've got your 3 estrogens down here. So this is something I use when I do testing to understand which parts of the hormone balance is actually out of balance, because sometimes it's not what we might think. So sometimes someone actually has too much progesterone and not enough estrogen, for example, or someone's testosterone's on the floor and we need to sort that out. So this is something I use. But here, good old cortisol down here, for some women, when we're stressed, cortisol seems to then have an impact on the other. So some women will have a hot flush immediately after something stressful. So there is some kind of link in there. And the other thing, of course, is the thyroid and its influence, which I wanted again just to touch on for you. So the incidence of thyroid disease in a population of postmenopausal women, so this is women that have gone through the menopause, so there will be clinical thyroid disease at 2.4%. In other words, the blood tests have shown that there is you know, evidence that there is thyroid disease, but there's another 23% of women that have what we call subclinical thyroid disease. In other words, doctors aren't going to medicate it, but your thyroid isn't functioning optimally. And among that subclinical group, 73% are actually hypothyroid, although not diagnosed, and 26% are hyperthyroid, so overactive. So the thyroid is kind of jumping about quite a bit in postmenopausal women. And the challenge we've got is the symptoms of thyroid disease are very similar to postmenopausal complaints, and it can be quite difficult to differentiate. Is this a postmenopausal symptom, or is this in fact a thyroid symptom? And I think sometimes it can be difficult for you and also for your GP to really fathom out how best to support you. But interestingly, even mild thyroid underfunctioning can have a number of clinical effects: depression, memory loss, cognitive impairment, and a variety of neuromuscular complaints. You can see the overlap we've got here with the postmenopausal symptoms that we talked about. And because we're at increased risk of osteoporosis and cardiovascular disease once we've gone through the menopause, leaving that thyroid untreated may exacerbate those risks as well. So you're kind of piling on different risks on top of each other. So I'm just going to see. Hi, Lena, thank you for joining us. Okay, so when we're looking at the menopause as a nutritionist, we will, is increase, I'll come back to that later, Lisa, thank you. So when we're looking at menopause from a nutrition point of view, because we look holistically, we'll look at whole different areas to target and support. So we would look at the estrogen progesterone balance, thyroid adrenal function, and you can see from what I've just talked about why we would do that. estrogen clearance pathways. So what on earth is that? That means that when we're finished with our hormones, our body needs to clear those out of our system through detoxification. And so we want to see that we're doing that in a safe way, because one pathway is pro-cancerous, pro-carcinogenic, and others are very safe. So just making sure that whatever hormones we are clearing, we're clearing well. And that might be relevant for someone who's looking at HRT as well. Liver and detox mechanisms for the same reasons around the estrogen clearance. And also, you know, if you're trying to lose weight, if those mechanisms aren't working correctly, then that might be one of the things blocking you from achieving what you want to do. Skin and mucosal function, again, going back to that dryness, we want to make sure that the skin and that you know, that surface is working optimally. And we want to reduce inflammation in the body, because that's where the joints might be starting to get sore. And we also know that inflammation is kind of the smoking gun for things like cancer. So again, we want to keep that down. We want to minimize sugar and insulin, because that does create inflammation, and obviously may lead to weight gain and type 2 diabetes for some people. And of course, we want to improve that microbiome and gut health, because we know that a lot of the work that around hormone clearance is done in the gut. So we want to also look at that as well. So there's quite a lot to address, really. It's not just a question of going along to GP and getting HRT. And just to say, I don't have I'm not against HRT, but you can see there's an awful lot of things you could do before you take that step. So let's look at lifestyle and exercise first. And we're just, you know, it's a jigsaw. So we're putting all these pieces together. And I'm not saying you have to do them all in one go, but certainly make a start. So we're going to talk about exercise, the right kind for your body and your bones. As you are going towards the menopause, we might choose slightly different exercise for your body. It may be less stressful, given that cortisol link that we talked about. And when we do a lot of cardio, we release a lot of cortisol. And we've got to be thinking about those bones because of that increased risk of osteoporosis. So making sure the exercise we do will support bone health as well. Reducing our toxic load and exposure. So there are a lot of foods, there are a lot of things actually that might contain xenoestrogen, so estrogen that might mimic other estrogens. So there may be things in our skincare and our makeup that we maybe want to be a bit more aware of, things like phthalates, BPA. We want to look at household cleaning products as well. Sometimes using a lot of bleach can be an issue in terms of hormone balance. Aluminium, we know may impact cognitive function if it gets up into the brain, and cling film can have estrogen mimicking hormones in it, which can be absorbed through fat in things like cheese, for example, if you're wrapping your cheese in cling film. I tend to use a lot of baking paper, I must admit, in the house, and a lot of Pyrex bowls with lids, so I don't have to have things in contact with cling film and aluminium. We need to look at alcohol consumption as well. At the end of the day, it's a toxin, so we will come back to that one and explain why. For some women, it just triggers hot flushes within half an hour. So we need to look at that. And then we need to go back to this whole idea of cortisol again. So how can we manage our cortisol levels? How can we de-stress? So, you know, gentle exercise like yoga, Pilates. I know Rona will be thinking that Pilates doesn't have to be gentle, but with, you know, it's not as stressful as going for an hour's run. Looking at things like meditation, headspace, tapping, emotional freedom technique, basically what works for you on that one. And then sleep is so important. Our body does so much work while we're asleep. It reduces inflammation, it changes the gut microbiome, it sets us up for the next day in terms of how much carbohydrate and food we might eat, our appetite. So really important to get that. So we'll talk a little bit in a moment about sleep hygiene and what we might do to improve our chances of getting a good night's sleep. Let's talk about exercise first. So keeping physically active is important for all hormonal balance, especially insulin, so blood sugar, and cortisol. So we want to keep active. So that might be just walking for some people. And it's really important that we don't overburden our systems. So don't make extreme changes. Don't suddenly take up an extreme sport in your 50s. Do things gently and gradually. And just take healthy steps to engage your body in physical activity. And I think 30 minutes 5 days a week is the recommended amount. I have an Oura ring, which helps me to keep a track of everything. If anyone wants any information on that, let me know. That's been amazing for tracking sleep and exercise. It even tells me when I need to ease up a bit if I've done too much. And studies show that all kinds of exercise programs, including Pilates and resistance exercise, improve strength, abdominal strength, and help functional independence. So as we age, we really want to stay independent, and reduces the risk of circulating estrogens in postmenopausal women, which is then a reduced risk of breast cancer. And I can't emphasize enough how much staying strong with your muscles, people that are falling over in their 80s, a lot of it is because they just don't have enough muscle. They've got something called sarcopenia. They've run out of muscle, and so there's not enough muscle to hold their bones up, their skeleton up. So keeping strong, particularly the core, really, really important. Now let's touch on alcohol. As I say, some women will find that a glass of wine will immediately trigger a hot flush, as it does directly affect their estrogen levels. And it tends to be a spike, and then it's the drop back down that causes the hot flush. So they did a pooled analysis of data from 53 studies, found that each alcoholic drink consumed per day, the relative risk of breast cancer increased by about 7%. And women who had 2 to 3 alcoholic drinks a day had a 20% higher risk of breast cancer because of this effect on estrogen. So really want to try and minimize alcohol consumption. So ideally 2 glasses a week, or none if you have if you have breast cancer, or if you've got a candida overgrowth, because wine obviously is full of yeast. I am the bearer of bad news, aren't I? Let's talk about sleep. So I love this little infographic on the right, and lots of really good top tips in terms of what we can do to get a good night's sleep. So ideally 7 to 8 hours sleep helps reduce your appetite and need for carbohydrates the next day. So if you're looking at this from a weight loss point of view, sleep is key to achieving that. And I don't mean, I was talking to someone the other day, I don't mean 7 to 8 hours in bed, I mean 7 to 8 hours asleep. And you can track that with various apps and gadgets these days. So, getting your head empty so you can go to sleep is really important. That daily schedule, really, really important. So things like meditation, tapping, these 2 apps can really help just to get your mind switched off, so that you are ready for sleep, and obviously turning off the tech as near as you can. Also, 3 hours between eating and going to sleep will really help as well. Some people find having an Epsom salt bath will help with relaxing, because it's full of magnesium. And although we want you to exercise regularly so that we're physically tired, make sure you're not exercising then trying to go to sleep. Reading a physical book can be really helpful when we're turning all that tech off. And I find lavender spray or lavender oil really, really good as well. Making sure your bedroom is dark and quiet and cool, also really important. And having a good mattress and pillow and bedding, also important as well. And I read about this top tip recently, which is apparently if you alternate between hot and cold showers 20 seconds at a time for about 3 minutes, apparently that really, really sends a message to your body that it's time to go to sleep. If you were to have a cold shower, it would wake you back up. So it's that alternating hot and cold that you're looking for. So I wanted to touch on again the stressing and improving vagal tone. So you've got a nerve called the vagus nerve that goes through the center of your body, and attaches to all your vital organs like your liver and your heart and so forth. But it is responsible for the stress response. So we want to improve that so that we get out of that stress response as quickly as possible. So we need it for the moment, but then we just want to be able to switch it off and be able to get back to life. So something called the 4-7-8 breath is really, really helpful. So you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and you breathe out for 8. A belly breath kind of into as though you were doing a yogic breath into the lower belly for that one. And ideally, you'll do it 3 times on waking and 3 times before going to sleep. And that really helps to keep our stress hormones in check. Getting outside, walking, or having lots of plants around the house really helps. Singing, humming, and generally having music also really helps. Gargling, because this nerve goes through the neck, gargling with cold water. Laughter and crying, just releasing emotion. Exercise improves it. And cold exposure, so that could be cold water swimming or cold showers, but so this would be something you would do in the morning, the cold showers. But I know quite a few people who are quite anxious find cold water swimming really helpful. So let's move on to the more aesthetic side of things. We want our skin to look healthy and we want to age well. So as many of you know, I'm a big fan of collagen, and the reason is because it's the glue that holds us together. So my preference is the liquid BioCell collagen, the type 2 with the hyaluronic acid and the chondroitin. So the hyaluronic acid, it's very moisturizing, and anecdotally, my menopausal ladies tell me that it certainly has helped with their vaginal dryness as well, taking the BioCell collagen. We want to have lots of antioxidants in our diet to reduce free radical damage, which basically is the aging process. So things like the sun will create free radical damage, so we just need to watch our sun exposure. And so we want those antioxidants, vitamins A, C, E, minerals, zinc and selenium in our diet. And I guess the easiest way really for the vitamins will be a brightly coloured plate. So lots of different vegetables and fruits of lots of different colours. Zinc can be through things like nuts and seeds, particularly pumpkin seeds, and selenium, a couple of Brazil nuts a day, will cover that one off. Essential fats, we need to be moisturizing our skin from within. So the omega-3 fatty acids, particularly flax and flaxseed oil, it's a very good phytoestrogen as well. Oily fish, walnuts and almonds. And then the omega-7 fats are in sea buckthorn oil, and again that's really helped my ladies with dry eyes, dry down below, so I'll often recommend an omega that's got all the different ones in 3, 6, 7, 9 to get that sea buckthorn oil in as well. And of course, hydrating your skin from within is also water. So some people have got dry skin because they're not drinking enough water. So 35 mils per kilo of body weight is what I would recommend. And of course, dehydrators are coffee, tea and alcohol. So, if you're someone that's trying to hydrate, watch how much you're dehydrating yourself at the same time. How are we all doing? Everyone okay? Good. So what and when to eat. Let's talk a little bit about weight loss and what I would suggest you do. And it is possible to lose weight postmenopausally, but I think it just takes an awful lot more effort and a lot more mindset shift. It's not something, you can't just lose half a stone in a week like you would have done in your 20s. It is, as we say, a marathon, not a sprint. So I would recommend 2 to 3 meals a day. 2 if you're looking at an intermittent fasting day of 16-8, so in other words, fasting 6, eating in an 8-hour window, and only snack if absolutely necessary, but small, low glycemic load snacks. In other words, we don't want to be having sugary snacks. Getting those lignans in, that are those phytoestrogens, into your diet postmenopausally, because we found that 10 grams, so a tablespoon of ground flax per day for 7 weeks, produce dramatic effects in estrogen metabolism. So that can really, really help. So some people just add a tablespoon of ground flax to their breakfast for example, maybe if they're having a granola or something like that, or you could sprinkle it on a salad. Some people will soak whole flax seeds and then neck that as well if you've got a little bit of constipation. Cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli, kale, cabbage and sprouts, really helpful for hormone detoxification and sulfation. So getting some of those in. If you've got thyroid issues, chuck away the water when you cook them, don't drink the water. Pulses, so things like chickpeas and lentils, very, very good. Green tea, very good for losing weight. In fact, it helps to lower the glycemic load of your food, and sage tea helps with hormones. And of course, those berries have got those lovely reds and black colours, which are full of antioxidants that we want. And if you are going to eat meat, then I would strongly recommend you buy grass-fed or pasture-fed organic meat, so that we're not getting the hormones from that. But that's what I do. So the menopause belly, Lisa's just asking, the fat around the middle is because when you've gone through the menopause, your body can carry on making estrogen in that fat around the middle. And also, if we are quite stressed, again, in that fat around the middle, we can make cortisol. So what you'll find is if you're doing lots of exercise that's pushing out a lot of cortisol, you'll find you'll lose weight and you'll tone up everywhere except around the middle. And if you're not supporting those the estrogens with things like the lignans, then again, you may find that you need that belly fat to make estrogens. So that's why I think it's important to de-stress, but also to get in those good phytoestrogens as well. As you'll notice, there isn't soya in my list. I think I've still got mixed views about whether soya is helpful or not, and it's certainly not helpful for the thyroid. So I tend to avoid that. I think these days there's so many other plant milks out there. We don't need to rely on soya in the way we used to. So I just want to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting, very, very briefly. There are lots of different ways to do that. You'll be probably maybe familiar with the 5-2 diet by Dr. Michael Mosley and his 800 fast diet as well. You can do a 16-8, a circadian, which is 13 hours overnight. You can do an 18-6, a 24, in other words, you've only got, and you can do OMAD, which means 1 meal a day. And there is something called the fasting mimicking diet, which is with Prolon, which I know a few of you have done. There are a whole host of benefits you can see on the right of having some intermittent fasting in your life, whether it's your brain, your adipose tissue, in other words, your fat, your muscles and their sensitivity to insulin, reducing inflammation, and improving glucose, insulin and leptin levels in your blood. There are lots and lots of reasons why exploring intermittent fasting is a good idea. It may also help people with jet lag if anyone's fortunate to be traveling, and it can help with fat adapting if you're someone who's trying to exercise while in ketosis. And it does switch us from growth to repair, so it's quite good for the aging process as well. And I use the app Zero. I know there are other ones out there now, but Zero you can get free, and it's quite good for tracking, and it's got loads of really lovely free advice. So in terms of getting the plate right, I'm going to speed up a little bit because I've got a lot to get through. This is a balanced plate. If you're someone that's going low carb, you would be taking out the grains, for example. That's essentially the protein's probably one of the big things that people don't do, having a quarter of that protein, and we want all these lovely veggies and lots of different colors and a little bit of fruit, but not too much. So I've got some examples here of menu ideas. I'm not going to go through these in a great deal of detail. What I'll maybe do is if anybody wants the PDF, I can share some of the slides with you. But the one I'm going to focus on really is the 16-8 metabolic reset that I've been doing myself, and I've lost 8 kilos doing that one. So I start the day with a black coffee or a green tea, have a salad with chicken and possibly pastrami or something like that as well, and then follow that with berries, and I use the Modere trim, which I'll talk about. That's breaking my fast at 12 p.m. And then in the evening, something like turkey meatballs, roast broccoli and salad, again, berries, some more collagen, no snacking. And during the day, I will be drinking the Go drink, which helps with energy and concentration, brain function, and also green tea and some water. So as I say, they are different choices here because we are all different, and so we need to pick the thing that works for us. But that's some suggestions on how you might eat. So I'm going to talk briefly about the metabolic reset. Here's one of my lovely meals. I'm definitely no good at plating up the pictures, but hey ho. So phase 1 is 2 days fat loading, followed by 41 days on a low fat and low sugar diet. So in other words, the idea is you've loaded all that fat up front so that you don't need the fat over the 41 days. Followed by a 30-day maintenance where it's moderate fat, low sugar and high protein. And then you repeat phase 1 and 2 if you need to. Now I've got lots of information on this and recipes and so forth, but I just wanted to give you an overview. And here are my before and after. So this was me middle of May, weighing 67.85 kilos with a body fat of 32.2%. Those are the things that I find really important. And here I am end of July, 59.8 kilos, 27.2% body fat. Muscle has gone down a tiny bit, but you can see muscle quality has stayed the same, and visceral has gone from 7 to 5.5. So I was very happy with that. So as I say, a typical day for me, black coffee, then I'll sip on the Go drink all morning, lunch at 12. The Go only has stevia in it, so it doesn't break your fast. Dinner by 8 o'clock, 2 to 3 litres of water. It is gluten-free and dairy-free throughout. And I would have the occasional vodka, lime and soda for a drink if I wanted to. So I also wanted to talk about, Modere. As you know, I have a Modere business. I want to talk to you about the products that I think are relevant to the menopause that they have produced. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we have protein powder for muscles. Foti is a great herb for hormone balancing. The collagen that I've already touched on as well. The body transformation system, which helps with that body composition. So it's the collagen with CLA, it's a thermogenic, and then we have the Activate, which helps with the bowel and liver detoxification that I talked about earlier on. Minerals for the bones and also for calming, for the enabling sleep. Go for energy and concentration. They do a harmonizing cream which has wild yam, which is a phytoestrogen, which is available in the UK. That gut microbiome, so they have a probiotic called Protozyme, and I find aloe vera very good for the gut as well. So addressing that microbiome that I talked about earlier on. And then they do clean living personal care products. I also use their washing pad and washing up liquid because they're kind to the environment and also kind to me. So they're very enzymatic in the way they clean. So if someone invited you onto this call, then obviously you can talk to them about getting hold of these kind of products at a discount. Let's talk about testing very quickly. So sometimes people don't really know where their hormones are. So we can do something called a Dutch test, which stands for dry urine test. And I can't remember what the CH stands for, but anyway, it's a really good test that will give you all of your hormones. What it doesn't test, however, is if you're on HRT, it will not give you the HRT levels, but it will give you your natural hormone levels. So that can be a really good way of assessing what's going on. If the gut's not right, then maybe a stool test might be something to explore. I also often run DNA profiles for people from a nutrition point of view, which will help them around estrogen metabolism and also around osteoporosis. So that can be really useful. And my ladies with osteoporosis, we sometimes do a bone resorption test to see how much bone they're turning over. And of course, if your GP won't do a full thyroid panel, which unfortunately they can't always get through the NHS, then that's something we will do privately as well. I'm not going to go through a lot on these supplements, and I've touched on some of them. But you'll have you may be familiar with things like Agnus castus, Dong Quai, black cohosh, but again, I would, you know, I'd work with someone before messing around with those. Vitamin D with K2, really important for bones. There are some good bone support supplements out there. Omega-7 is that sea buckthorn oil for vaginal dryness. Here it is in the an omega mix. Solgar-7 I use for people with arthritis. That's often helpful. And of course, there are broader probiotics. There is the Protosyns, but there are other ones. And then these two are topical. So V-Gel and Yes are topical for the vaginal area. Might be used daily for real discomfort, or maybe during sex if you know, and they do send samples so you can try them and see what suits you best. So in summary, you know, work with a qualified person to get a personalized plan. If you want to go into this in a lot of detail, increase those good fats in your diet, obviously outside of the metabolic reset, increasing liver friendly foods. So we touched on some of those, like broccoli. Reducing your toxic load, really important. Eating regular balanced meals, so 2 to 3, and perhaps with a 16-8 day. Making sure you do the right kind of exercise. Reducing alcohol and caffeine, as they may induce hot flushes. Take supplements if needed. Manage your stress. Not much to remember, is there? And sleeping 7 to 8 hours. So I will stop sharing my screen so that you can ask any questions. So if anybody wants to unmute themselves, they can. I don't know, I think you might have to ask to, or put your hand up if you want me to unmute you. I'm not sure whether I've got to.
I've just unmuted.
Oh, there you go.
Laura, hi there.
Yeah, good. Hi.
That was absolutely fantastic, really informative. I've just written down loads of notes, stuff I didn't know, so thank you very much.
Very welcome.
The one area that I get very